Good evening. We are now recording the 10th online reading of the Divine Order and the Universe. You can start with questions if you like.
Now, first of all, last week was a bit of a heavy, but we got through it. We got it, kept our pace.
We did our best.
Yes, that's right. We will continue reading today, without revisiting previous topics too much. One of our friends asked, if the spirit connects to a body, to the material universe to increase its experiences, is there a being that also needs these experiences of the spirit? No, there is not such a thing. Also, frankly, we are very careful to comply with the literature of the book while we are talking and explaining. We use the term of being only for the instances where the spirit can't intervene with the matter universe but uses a kind of body to carry the influences of the matter universe to matter and to the body within the matter universe, and sometimes only to matter when in the plan of duty. We talk about such a body, and we call it being, so please don't think a body like we humans have. This is an interval milieu we're talking about. And we as human beings have our own body, but we also have our being, and our being is always connected to the spirit necessarily, and it is the exemplar of spirit in the matter universe. If you notice, the word being is a specially chosen word. It means made to be, that is, a mechanism, a bundle of influences that can work during the applications of spirit within the ever-developing levels of matter as its exemplar, and it is made to be in accordance to the knowledge of spirit and the guardian beings, and in accordance with the original principle and with the principles of matter universe. So, it is created. Yet, now we can't even say spirit is created because we don't know the time of its beginning. We don't know. Those aspects of the spirit are completely unknown to us. I mean, we humans love thinking of levels, of course, rightfully so we can understand, yes, we can think in this way to understand the matter universe but only up to some amount. But thinking the realms and so on as levels the book says that it may be wrong, but it's okay up to a point in order to understand, but beyond the matter universe, this thinking in levels stops. I mean, things like, it's upper, it's lower, it's side etc. Such thinking is no more. Forget about these. These adjectives, these forms of expression are all about human beings. That is, how an ant will not be able to understand our descriptions of these adjectives. Likewise, we cannot understand such states beyond the higher plans of duty. Moreover, even if we can really sense those of the plans of duty, even if we can really intuit it, we can only receive knowledge about the states outside the matter universe as information, we take it as knowledge and we set it aside as the information of that knowledge. So, that's our goal anyway, within our associations or within our knowledge, when we talk about spirit according to this new knowledge in the book. We no longer talk in certain terms about such states beyond the matter universe, and this is normal because we do not have much knowledge about this. Of course, similarly, about the original principle, as well. So, we can't say much about it. Even, about other universes, as well, we cannot say much. I am about to finish my words, but there was a clue in the part we studied last week, or in the previous week. That is, we only know that the matter universe is actually in a more elementary level relative to the advancement levels of other universes. Let's not say advancement but say, for the evolutionary needs of the spirit. We only know that. Yes, I know, it is again thinking in levels but not exactly so. Because, spirit implements many simultaneous applications. Let's not miss this point. At the end of so many words, is there a being that benefits from the spirit? The book doesn't say anything like that, anywhere. So, we can't even think something like this.
After all, we can't call it being. What we call being must be here, in the material system. And, we've seen the highlights as we read the previous pages, in more detailed points about the formation of being. There, we learn all the stages that go from amorphous matter to being. So, no, we can't call what is beyond spirit a being. Let's point this out once again. Here's another question by another friend. I'm trying to figure out how I can get the value differentiation mechanism to work correctly. the book talks about the necessity of, while doing something good for someone, we should not be doing anything bad for someone else. How can we know that? The value differentiations we cause with our actions create endless karma. If man is a duality unit, he has opposite poles within himself. How will it be possible to balance these two poles within us, such as goodness and badness? There is a saying, don't say you don't even hurt an ant, because the ant gets hurt by the word even. It is impossible to filter our every act through such a deep conscientious judgment, and this impossibility creates infinite value differentiations, an infinite loop, she said. The important thing here is, as we were talking about these opposite poles, there is a chapter that we will read later in the Divine Order and the Universe. And there it says the being gets developed through conscientious choices between earthly cravings and duty. And we look and see that from the point humanity started, there are many stages that we have passed from the caveman to today's modern man. During this course of time, our comprehension is shaped by the events that happened to us at certain stages, formed a development towards now. Previously, it was more automatic. Later on, our comprehension increased a little more and more, and also, we continue to learn with each and every life we live. Again, later we will see in the book, when we finish each life, what do we do with that life? We make an accounting of that life. We rule off its books, and we compare it to all those past lives, and so it becomes essence knowledge, and we bring along the parts that remained missing or unfinished in each of them. Even the points where and when we couldn't act conscientiously in those lives, and we try to complete these parts in our later lives. Later, we will again read in the book that the need of having already lived 500 to 700 lives, until reaching to the present level of humanity. So, it means that, as our friend mentioned with that saying about not hurting the ant, etc., conscience has numerous finer points. Likewise, there are opposites within us. That is, we can choose ego, acting egoistically, but we can choose altruism too. After all, the being also advances when it acts egoistically, it gets also developed in that way, but this progress is a progress through suffering. Later, we will study this within the principle of cause and effect. We always face with the causes and consequences of an action we take. If we are not very aware of this, then it means that we act automatically, and events and situations are shaped accordingly. Yet, when some comprehension begins to increase, and if we consciously choose the earthly cravings or ego in the actions we am, then our accounting in the hereafter, which occurs as our defense mechanisms disappear following the shutting down of the system after death, our confusion and accounting become tougher. So, we see that increasement of comprehension in our acts and choosing accordingly is important. We will cover the topic of value differentiation in more detail in the following chapters. But for now, we can say that much. Is there anything you want to add?
I wrote down a note about comprehension. We choose in accordance with our comprehension. There is no problem with that. Making mistakes is our right. System is based on making mistakes, anyway. Of course, we can develop without making mistakes, but such a thing is not always appropriate, it's not easy. On top of that, even if we made the right choice at the level of our comprehension, I mean not an egotistical choice, not a choice suitable to our earthly cravings, but even if we made a choice that we think we're doing the best, from the next level of conscience, more precisely, from the level of developed conscience at a higher level of comprehension, that choice we made has actually become a very selfish choice for us. We may even feel ashamed that we made such a choice. We can see this with the following examples. We can look at the issue of sacrificial offerings. First, human sacrifices, then the sacrificing the most ailing and troubled members of the tribe, then, giving up human sacrifice but sacrificing animals, and now we are talking about how we can do this with a better understanding, with awareness. We now try to understand how energy works, trying to understand how influences work and to choose accordingly. Here is a group of humans, at that period of time, at a level of comprehension that believed that they did the right thing even when they were sacrificing a human, and in a later period, us as individuals from that group objected that idea and argued for and talked about sacrificing animals is the right thing. And it was, for that period. And much later after that, when we reach at a more developed level where we don't need those kinds of influences from such offerings, or have the chance of transforming such influences by much more different methods, then we arrive at a state where we don't need offering such sacrifices. This is an example, or a civil servant's way of understanding the responsibility of his work entails, or choosing the way of doing his duty and his shifting first to egoistical side, taking bribes by saying, I need to do this to earn money for my family. But later, maybe for 1 or maybe 3 lifetimes, he becomes a person who gets by only by his salary. Of course, this may not always be civil service but may be other jobs and duties. In a more advanced state, he may feel the pain of doing things for the material gains, for money, and instead, he becomes a person who doesn't think anything else but doing whatever is necessary for a country, for the people. See the life of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Such are the types of lives at the last stage we mentioned. So, all these examples are all ways of thinking. At that level of comprehension, all are very normal, all are but according to the level of comprehension. And here, we make the choice according to that level of comprehension. Mr. Eric Dull repeated many times, even the most advanced being always has a banana peel under his feet. So, he could have slipped without noticing it. So, all of these are choices that depend on understanding. Let's exemplify them in our own lives.
We are also told, do you remember? It is said that the ground gets slippery as one goes higher ground. So, I guess here it means as your earthly cravings become refined. So, according to some, they do not see the ant and hurt it. But you arrive at such a breadth of understanding that you become sensitive and caring toward everything, every being in the universe. Now, here are some comments by Mr. Gemal. When it is said don't hurt even an ant, it means that because it's small and hard to see, it requires attention, effort. This also fits with our spiritual knowledge. The more your comprehension, your capacity expands, you are responsible for that much. And actually, as the levels and the realities expand, our responsibilities increase according to the comprehension we gain. That's what our elders always said. The ground gets slippery more and more.
In fact, as we raise our realities here, as we raise our understanding, what we come into contact with, the sphere of influence we penetrate expands further. And this means that the vibrations of matter we come into contact with are getting higher and expanding further. Such a stage may be arrived at theta, let alone an ant. The concern may not be even about a microorganism. Because then, that penetration encompasses most things. Of course, we don't say this will be in a human life, but when it starts to penetrate further, we call it expansion of comprehension, and in that state of comprehension, it gets beyond of keeping the ant out of harm's way and becomes taking responsibility, that is, taking on duty in the ant's management. Our topic is already heading that direction now.
Another question is from Alcom On. He has tried to adapt the terms we use like original principle, beings with duty, etc. to the terms and number of laws Gurdjieff uses in his teachings. 3, 6, 12, 48, etc. And he's asking, isn't this the same? So, my advice here is taking the teachings of Gurdjieff as a whole in itself, and on the other hand, taking the divine order and the universe as a whole in itself. Because Gurdjieff says being or presence, but this book doesn't talk about that being, this being, etc., or the divine order, and the universe talks about the realms, but doesn't say this is the first realm, this is the second realm, this is the third, etc. For this reason, first we need to take the whole of it and read the book and understand this universe it talks about. And after that maybe we can compare it with different teachings, but I think that these comparisons, these analogies, These attempts of finding similarities do not seem very appropriate to me. Well, what do you want to say?
I can actually say the exact same thing. I read this somewhere, dear friends. After a while you can't read too many books because everyone actually reflects their own reality in their books. We can only embrace an author's wisdom when we read his book and take in his examples. Maybe you can do this, of course, I'm not saying that you shouldn't read books. However, we can focus on the mainframe of a book. These laws Gurdjieff writes about, besides things he gleaned from his own life experiences, are only about the physical conditions of the vibrations at the hydrogen atom realm in the matter universe. That's all. That realm is that much for him. Even if you collect all the realms Gurdjieff mentions, this is still that much. And the concepts of the divine order in the universe, such as the original principle, the universe, spirit's position in the matter universe and universes and such, none of them are to be discovered in a normal lifespan.
Miss Tülin wrote us a comment and used a metaphor there. The knowledge that we will never be able to integrate and meet with our spirit is very shocking. She says. Then she comments on the plan of love and so on. And she made a metaphor with a computer game. Indeed, this is the subject we are going to cover a little bit today. It will explain the topic better. And again, we will be reading about the plan of love. We will be studying it a little more. I think our friends should be patient for those coming topics. But it is so beautiful that our friends read the divine order and the universe in a meditation, in an effort, and personally, I really like this. We thank our friend for her effort.
That's super. When we say that you can use these, I really like to see that they considered this. I'm so glad. This is one thing I want to say. And the second is, and I am saying this for Ms. Tülin. Just as Tülin said, let's not say right away that this is this, that is that. Let's not do that now but later, let me say, please keep on watching us. I read 2 or 3 times what Pelin Hanım wrote, and as we read, at every related point and whenever I think of an example, I will tell you how a concept may seem or not, so we can interpret it. I will do my best.
I'm starting to read. We need to talk here about the concept of being, which we just mentioned, and which we will address again later. Being is a matter unit. More correctly, a complex of the influences that carry the necessities of the original principle and pertain to spirits, a matter unit which is synthesized by a given spirit through congregating among matter which as, at a certain stage of development to service itself until the end of universe. So, each being is an evolutionary vehicle assigned to the service of a certain spirit until the end of the universe. This is such a being that it expresses all necessities of spirit's behaviors which occur in the supra-universe plan. And these expressions are reflected to spirit as if reflected from a mirror. Therefore, the being is the symbol of a spirit, to whom it serves in the universe. So, because the being in the service of a spirit completely expresses all the behaviors, stirrings, and needs of that spirit, we can also look at it as the spirit itself. For every manifestation that appears on that being is but an expression that is reflected to the universe, representing the appearance of spirit's behaviors, in proportion to the allowance of the matter possibilities it uses. And when spirit is no more, all expressions and manifestations belonging to it will vanish and the being will disintegrate at once. This, for me, is one of the paragraphs in which the most beautiful and intense information about being is given.
Here, of course, one of the issues that shocked us the most, and I agree. And when spirit is no more, all expressions and manifestations belonging to it will vanish and the being will disintegrate at once. Why does this shake us in the first place? We need to examine this. We need to analyze our psychology accordingly. Why we are affected by this fact. Now, I can't read the comments posted there right now. But, of course, while giving conferences in our associations, this issue also comes up. I mean, the issue of having an end for us. We think in ego terms and with misgivings, like, whatever our spirit has gained, it takes it from here and we disappear. It's like we're no more. It leads us into a highly egocentric bodily fear and apprehension. This is because of our bodies. I'm talking about the flesh and bone body. Do we feel our being? It is impossible to feel. But it's already there, so that's our consciousness, after all. However, where we feel more connected to is our body. It's 99%. Our body exists 99% for us. That's a little bit more relaxed connection in meditations and like. That's it, we are so tightly bonded to our body that, by the way, it should be like this in order to survive. Because only this way we can endure this life. This is the only way to survive, this is the only way to deal with these viruses and this pandemic. We stay because we have to stay like this, and because we stay like this, we think that the beginning and the end apply only to this body. We say, okay, we are not only body but being, alright, but what the heck, being will also disappear. But we take this side of being as only information, this development of consciousness, of comprehension of that upward push of that vast array of influences, that side of being towards the spiritual side, we just take it as a lot of information. Like, being learns this and we disappear. As if it is something like the learning we're doing now. Actually, I guess we can feel it after a certain level, our spiritual connection through the channel of comprehension, and of course, via a reflection of the original principle, occurs rather in the level of understanding and actually, happens in active area. In other words, our connection to spirit is not related to learning something. Yes, we say that it is learning the matter universe. We will say it over and over, but let's try not to understand it in a literal way. Learning such a thing is not like learning how to swing a hammer. With that realization, with that increase in comprehension, we can't say that we occupy a space in spirit, but rather, the meaning of those influences actively begins to occupy a space in the spirit, and then we begin to be in those states. And at the unitary, in that unity of comprehensions, this concern is no longer in question. That's for certain. Imagine if beings that reach the unitary have such concerns. If this is a problem as we think, imagine how such fears could be unified and become more terrible. Like, boy, we have come to the end of the road. What would happen to us? But this is only a situation for sheep to live in. Or, to speak the truth of the matter. It is a situation that people would think of when they were overly attached to their bodies. But the fact is not like that. But I can't say, only who lives it, knows about it. I haven't experienced it. I don't know that level of it, but putting it into words, under current conditions is only that much possible. So, don't carry that concern unnecessarily. Nothing disappears, at the final analysis, nothing disappears.
After all, it will be explained later in the book how each of our lives go through accounting and then filtered into essence knowledge. And that essence knowledge is again reflected by as influences to spirit. Even in some parts of the book we will read that the essence knowledge that transmitted to the spirit does not include details of matter, body, or lives. Only the information and influences filtered from it is transferred there. And in the end, in the final analysis, because the essence knowledge that is filtered and gleaned from all of our lives are transferred to spirit, even if the being disappeared. That transferred state of essence knowledge as influences becomes integrated into spirit in a way that we do not know its nature. So, it also looks like this. You made a robot. That is, you made a body, and you sent it down, under the sea for probing and examination. It collected materials, got information, collected data and synthesized the data it received earlier. And what does it do? It passed on all that information to the mothership. And after the job is done, when the robot is disappeared, we say, whoa, look, that robot was serving the mothership. But what will happen to it now? But the ocean probing is over. The mission is completed. The job is done. Consequently, all of that information was transferred to the mothership. transferred to main center, and after all, the point was to transfer that information, in our case, that influence, essence knowledge. Because we always see ourselves as the center of the universe, this thought of extinction stems from the egoic state of man. Because of this, humanity has always sought immortality. Yet, true immortality is actually in this process. So, all accumulation of all lives you've lived, and so on, become essence knowledge and become immortal when transferred to spirit, in a way we do not know its nature, of course. The important point here is the book says when the soul is no more, I think. This phrase means when spirit withdraws or removes its influence, its reflected expression from this universe. I guess we shouldn't understand it as complete disappearance of spirit.
Yes, the removal of its influence in the universe. The book talks about the end of its relationship with the universe, of course.
Of its relationship.
Yes. In further pages, it is mentioned that essence knowledge cannot be understood by us, so let's not think of it that way. For example, lying is wrong. Let's not consider this as essence knowledge for spirit. That is, it is an influence relationship at very low levels even for our being. But we do not know its reflection in the spirit. I mean, maybe what we gain as human beings in all those lives, look, I say human, in all the lives we lived in all material universes, what we have earned as human beings, is only a moment in the original time. That knowledge we have gained in all these times, their reflection in the spirit, that essence knowledge is not something we can predict or imagine. I mean, that's why examples like reading a book and getting information, or doing an internship and getting information about something, such examples, analogies that are only proper for the material universe no longer fit here, so, no matter how many examples we can give just doesn't fit there anymore. That is, we say being seems like playing a video game, but then where is the spirit? We're going to examine this a little more. We're going to study that analogy. But there is one more point I would like to mention in this paragraph. A matter unit which is synthesized by a given spirit through congregating among matter which is at a certain stage of development to service itself until the end of universe, more correctly a complex of the influences, what does the book speaks of? The being. Being is a matter unit, more correctly a complex of the influences that carry the necessities of the original principle and pertain to spirits, a matter unit which is synthesized by a given spirit a given spirit, actually, the spirit it belongs to. Through congregating among matter which is at a certain stage of development to service itself until the end of universe. Now here, the book says, complex, and at some point in the book, it talks about a system that its parts do their own work and perform their own duties. Of the existence for their own structure and for the fields of consciousness. Here, too, the word complex actually fits nicely. Now complex, we say, for example, sports complex. Why do we say sports complex? It is a place where all kinds of sports can be performed which contains proper fields or tools for the application for those types of sports. Also, there are places called the art complex. For example, a building where all branches of art can be practiced. So, for me, the word complex here means an ensemble that weaves a fabric out of all these influences slowly that will be able to understand and manage the relationships of all applications needed to be performed in the matter universe and then, that will able to take on duties. When I read a matter unit which is synthesized by a given spirit, such a concept emerges in me. The concept is actually emerging here, in me. A unit of matter that a given spirit synthesized. More precisely, a complex of influences. Synthesizing is very important here, think of it like a ball of wool, loose and tangled. What is it when you pull a string from that yarn that seems complicated? You pull something like a straight thread from that mess of yarn. Or from another perspective, when you look at a sweater knitted from that yarn of wool, there are numerous threads and loops intertwined, and you see a beautiful pattern and structure that emerged. We may think the being like this. Of course, this is still an analogy. Yet, there is no erring in a simile, after all. But let's try to understand this in this way, how those influences form in existence and how existence creates this. So, let's try to intuit how the spirit gradually develops this complex of influences and makes it usable.
Of course, here, another point made is that being serves the spirit until the end of the universe, which is the unitary, that unity of comprehensions, the utmost point of the universe. So, it means that whenever we say being, which is an expression, an exemplar, a representative or a reflection of spirit, we always mean a unit in the matter universe, never the spirit itself. After all, the relationship between spirit and matter can never occur directly. This is mentioned over and over again in different parts of the book. To me, this paragraph is really nice in describing being, completely expresses all the behaviors, stirrings and needs of that spirit. Therefore, we can also look at it as the spirit itself. You know, we say my soul, my spirit. Maybe it is much better to say my being or my spiritual being, because when we say my soul or spirit, it does not mean the spirit itself. Yes, we are linked to it, but not directly. Our being is an expression or exemplar or representative of our spirit, reflected to the universe.
In the next paragraph, the book uses a nice word, a symbol of spirit amidst matter, so we have another term for the being to keep in mind. Please continue reading.
The being has a two-sided function in the universe. One of these is simply as a laboratory vehicle for the spirit. The other is as a symbol of spirit amidst matter. As a result of these two functions, the being also needs a field of application. Therefore, in order to properly reflect reactions the spirit awaits from it, it has to gather the necessary elements of these reactions from its milieu. That is, to procure from the beings and matter in its vicinity. Expanded knowledge will be given later on this topic. So, the being is the laboratory of the spirit, and what the beings needs to do. It needs a body. It needs to build a body from matter because the spirit waits reactions reflected from it. Reactions that will happen through the interactions between the body of the being, other bodies of other beings, and the matter in its environment. And the book will give more details on this topic.
Yes, it looks like there is always a need for bodies, and we need to expand our understanding about the bodies. Even the being uses a body in the semi-subtle realm. This needs to be pondered upon, dear friends. Indeed, the semi-subtle realm is not a realm without bodies. Yet, that body depends on the scope and degree of the being's understanding and comprehension. Because the semi-subtle realm is the stage for separation from the hydrogen atom realm, the aim here is to get the being to build a body, and after the needs are met via this body, being becomes able to leave that body and to be connected to subtler, finer matter, until the being reaches its own essential being and gains the ability for using its own matter and the skills for influencing and adapting completely. The semi-subtle realm is such a place. But in the beginning, it builds the matter combination most suitable for its comprehension, and this is a body. Now, in our hydrogen atom realm, why we are humans right now? Why we are not animals instead? Because, our beings built the matter combination most suitable for their comprehension. We, that is, our beings build the most suitable bodies, the closest one to our comprehensions. This is why we are humans right now. Our comprehension has reached this level, and this will continue for a while like this, but after a certain stage, these bodies will not be needed anymore.
Yes, the important point here is, the being is the laboratory of the spirit and a symbol of the spirit. Within this two-sided function, the being needs fields of applications and interactions with matter and other beings so it can reflect the reactions to its spirit. And for these reactions to occur, there must be formations, transformations, deformations of matter, and for these to occur, there must be motion in matter. And for the motion to occur, the opposite sides of a duality unit is used, and to which opposite we move towards or choose, the value differentiation occurs accordingly. And what we call development happens in this way. We will discuss these topics in detail when I read these paragraphs. I see beautiful descriptions about the position of the being relative to the spirit.
I'd like to mention something. The needed influences and reactions have to be taken from the other beings and matter in its vicinity. These other beings and matter, this topic will be discussed later in detail. Please keep this in mind. How many types of influences, how these types of influences work, etc. First, the being can't learn by itself. And secondly, the original principle or its necessities and the influences coming from the unitary, all of these influences are necessary. Yet, there is no system that's saying to human being, this is the right thing. This is the wrong thing. Accept it. This will go on forever, as it is. We perceive the way of this complex system by living it. How do we live it? Through matter we exist in, through the whole system of matter we engage with. And this complex system of beings happens to be humans, as well as animals and plants. We, as beings, we work for experiencing all of these. We work for learning the true nature of such existences.
Later, when we start reading the system of the body, we will read in the book that there are that number of beings as the numbers of brain cells. Within liver, there are beings of all those liver cells. There are groups of being that govern the organs, systems, centers, and the main being governs all of these. So, as you said, there is a complex system of beings that are in experience. A whole spectrum of beings. We will study these, as well. I'll continue reading. Now, here, a problem needs to be solved that may come up in mankind's minds. Seeing that the being is but matter combinations with all of its actions and activities, all of its emotions and thoughts. Then what does it gain from serving a spirit which has no direct relation to itself? In other words, what will it achieve from going through bitter and sweet experiences, working, striving so much for the evolution of spirit, without even knowing about the quality and form of this, to whom it serves? And if one day, with the departure of that spirit from the universe, it will go back to its endless darkness as a zero after completing such advanced stages of development in parallel to the evolution of the spirit it serves, will all the activities it executed throughout the development of a universe be gratuitous? Such a thought that may come arise in the minds of mankind can make them pessimistic and lead them to mental confusion. However, before anything else, if some deep thinking is conducted upon the knowledge we have given above about the relations of matter and spirit, it will be understood that the situations causing such discussions are only appearances, and that the truth is not such. Nevertheless, this topic needs to be illuminated so as not to leave a dark spot in our thoughts. Let us take first an amorphous matter. There is no motion, no form in it. But when this amorphous matter enters into the state of being, together with qualities that belong to the whole being, many capabilities and states occur in it, starting with the simplest and increasingly ascending, such as loves, sympathies, antipathies, compassions, acts of conscience, thoughts, judgments. Now, let us explain the relations of these manifestations with amorphous matter, which may compel the minds of mankind. Well, this part is clear enough. These questions are the questions we ask, our friends ask. That is, if one day, with the departure of that spirit from the universe, will the being go back to its endless darkness as a zero, back to amorphous matter? As you said, this may lead people to confusion, pessimism. Yet, the book went back to beginning to make this point clear, to the amorphous matter.
Yes, here what strikes me most is the phrase of, the situations causing such discussions are only appearances and that the truth is not such. Why is it interesting? Because, the appearance is not reality. It is valid even in physics. Appearance is only up to the extent to sense organs' capacity. For example, there is this well-known question in philosophy, the missing shade of blue question. I mean, how do you know that it is blue? What does blue mean? Is the blue to me same with the blue to you? This is the appearance. So, if we apply this to the realities, there are distinct differences according to each and every understanding for even one fact or event, and we can see that we experience only its appearances. More correctly, they become different because of the values we assign to them, because of our ego, our fears, but especially of the values we assign to them. This is how we always perceive things, and in this way, they become appearances. How we perceive them, how we see them. However, they are not the factual or true states of that thing, not the objective state. That is why this material phase we live in is called subjective phase by the book. We will read it later. When we pass to the objective phase, we will be like, come on, was it actually this? I mean, of course, we will not say exactly this, but maybe we will feel sorry for all those times we spent in the previous phase. That is, we will regret our fears, our earthly cravings, our relation with matter when we see how those subjective appearances hindered us. Well, actually, even now, this topic we discuss, is hindering us right now. And we will overcome this in some way. How? We will overcome this with knowledge, as usual, and will try to overcome it by intuitions. That is, we will try to understand better and better as we meditate on about the things we read in this book, in a more connected way without higher parts. By the way, I remembered a movie, such a good movie, it is called The Man Who Knew Infinity. It is not about quantum theory, do not worry. You can find it on YouTube, it is a must-watch movie. A true life story, and it is set at beginning of the century when quantum studies began, and perfectly conveys the necessity of intuitive work in the sciences and how far it can take the science, but alongside the intuition, how the hard work and study is also necessary. This movie is so fitting to the point I wanted to make. In the similar way, in sciences and in understanding this book, we can work in this way. In that movie, there is the dogma of science. And in this book, the message is about overcoming other dogmas. Therefore, passing to intuitive living is important. Only then we have the chance of gradually getting rid of the appearances and of starting to understand more objectively.
Well, honestly, with our current understanding within the superficial time, it feels like this will happen tomorrow. Because we can't understand what infinity is. Even all those processes until the unitary will continue in an infinite proceeding, we humans, within this limited lifetime we have, we start worrying. See. Even the being will perish. I think that is why the plan foreseen that people may feel confused when they read these lines. So here they explained and emphasized this point. This strikes me as interesting. I continue reading. In truth, all ways of humane action, moods, emotions and thinking, beliefs of people to which they attribute spiritual values and consider supramatter, are but matter function whose liquidity is in increase. However, until now, mankind should not have to see this truth so openly. Not until they could execute tests and experiences that had to be undergone in these realities safely and soundly. But now, today, truths are explained as they are, for mankind has attained the strength of learning the truths openly. It is possible to give many examples from the world on this topic. The purest, the most sentimental and ideal emotions, thoughts and acts which appear as supramatter, are only the manifestations of the most fluid material possibilities of the world. Many actions that are given an expressive quality by mankind as emotional acts involving love are the expression of a high possibility to sympathize, of a high matter fluidity, of a high matter capability of encounter, interaction and encompassment. Likewise, all antipathies, sympathies, grudges, cruelties, selfishness, altruism, self-devotion, gratification, bliss, suffering. In short, all values pertaining to all feelings and ideas that are called subjective, imaginations, thoughts, ideals, faiths, creeds, powers of invention and creativity, talents, genius, passions, desires, afflictions, habits, and all states that are called psychological, fears, courageousness, treacheries, truculence. Feelings of good and bad, etc., are the manifestations of energies of various kinds that diffuse from matter that exists on earth but is not recognized yet by the comprehensions of mankind. Therefore, mankind's mastering these, overcoming these, means they're mastering matter, overcoming matter. In none of all these realities called spiritual, moral, or psychological has matter been overstepped. What has been used here is always matter. However, to know this has not been possible for mankind until now, and this was, as we said, a necessity. This truth will be known by mankind from now on.
Of course, this was one of the most unexpected parts when we read this book for the first time. I mean, none of us was expecting to read this. Even I was assuming that such emotions and feelings can't be linked to matter and was not accepting the possibility of measuring such emotional states and their interaction with matter. However, after reading and gradually internalizing this knowledge, these lines started to gain more meaning for me. After all, what was the rule of the system? Everything in the universe is all matter. This is the rule. So, how could I place the emotions, thoughts, feelings outside of this? And after all, these are also activities. Our activities, changes in our energy caused by an emotion, is another activity. For example, when the book talks about love, it does not talk about the expansion of our aura or changing its color when we are in a higher state of love. This is only a result. Actually, through love, the skill of managing that material state, the mechanism of love gets developed in a human being. And this development begins to manifest a material state, one of which can be observed in the aura, in the energetic fields. Or this development can be seen in which kind of events we attract to our lives. Yet, the main thing we make application of is the love itself. And love in itself is one of the topics that become a field of study for us, with the disclosure of this book. In short, nothing is outside of matter. And the first words we read in the divine order in the universe were, "This book is part of the harmony we see, feel around us, and name as nature in a partial fashion." Yet, when we consider the all variations of matter, we understand that matter which we can perceive only a smallest part of, is much more encompassing and contains activities of much more clearer equivalents of those emotions we mentioned. Understanding our emotions means actually to work for understanding these subtle states of matter, its emotional states and charges, and their influences over matter, their features like forming, deforming, and manipulating matter. And this is what called knowing oneself, knowing ourselves, and knowing matter. And this is we term as overcoming matter. When we study the lives and teachings of the prophets, it becomes obvious that they were very developed in this regard. For example, Jesus Christ had said, "I have overcome the world." And Muhammad said, "O Allah, show me the reality of all things as it really is." But of course, such beings are not beings that don't know this and that need to learn here in the world. Yet, even though they are beings in duty, because they are connected to a human brain and human body, they feel this need to restudy matter, and trainings they had were done amidst matter, after all. All of them were trained for a period of time, and I talk about an actual training. I mean, none of them sat down and waited until a certain age, without doing anything, just waiting, let this divine message comes and then I can save humanity. All of the prophets gone through trainings since their childhood, deep trainings. And when they were on those mountain tops, working intuitively, they were benefiting from those trainings. And when they properly discovered the mechanism of revelation, that is, arranged all things they already know in a suitable way for those times, then they began to do their duties in the world. And all those trainings and intuitive work were for preparation of their bodies with their all-comprehension. They lived through hardship and events, and learnt from these, and they elevated themselves in a faster way. And their trainings were all about using matter in higher or subtler levels that we mentioned. Love, fears, betrayals, good deeds, bad deeds, Even the prophets had to go through all those emotions, only difference was, they utilized these emotions. Let's not forget Moses. He went to the mountain Sinai to receive the 10 Commandments, and in his absence, Israelites went awry right away. They melted their gold and molded a statue of calf to worship. Can you imagine the degree of betrayal? Moses had saved them from slavery, yet they couldn't wait for a month and their old realities surfaced right away. We have a saying in Turkish, "May your patience be infinite as the prophets." What's quality of the patience of a prophet? That compassion caused by the ability of using matter. As Jesus Christ said, "Forgive them, Father. They don't know what they are doing." Those compassionate words. If they knew, they didn't do this. Because we talk about such subtle level matter. Perhaps, these were the most frequently said words all prophets mumbled to themselves or said aloud throughout their lives. If they knew, they didn't do this. Because they were very developed and advanced in such matters, they were able to deal with all those betrayals, persecutions, bad deeds.
And even in their last breath, prophets could say, "Forgive them. They don't know." Because they, that is, humans, were not conscious about their acts and deeds. They were and mostly still are in automatism. So, personally, at every point I read in the divine order and the universe, I ponder upon how should I apply this in my life? How should I live my life? In the overcoming matter, it is so important for us that we can govern, have control over our thoughts, emotions, feelings. Nowadays, in the fields of neurology and neurobiology, there are many discoveries that tells us that everything has a frequency, our emotional states as well. If it is a frequency, then it has an influence. Then, working on our feelings, beliefs, and transforming these within our current reality becomes very important. After all, if my being collects and syntheses the knowledge through my acts caused by my emotions, thoughts, and feelings, then I need to study these closely, don't I? In which states I am mostly. And in all esoteric schools and teachings, this is said, and all these teachings are about knowing oneself, studying our inner world, our emotions, thoughts, and actions so we can be able to direct these in the right way. Or, as termed in the book, mastering these. Yes, we read these, good for us, but it does not mean that we become conscious about these right away. We can only be transformed and got developed by working on ourselves under the light of this knowledge. In this sense, I think that these parts we read are very important and give us practical clues. Even the most spiritual, most lofty state that could be attained, from the enlightenment of Buddha to the utmost level of influence the prophets attained within the mechanism of revealment, still occur within the matter system in this universe. Even such states happen within our matter realm, and even such states are states of matter. This is one of the points that strike me most. Because what is our most common longing? We want to get glimpses from realms supposedly outside of matter or non-matter. We meditate or strive to get such insights, visions in dreams, in various experiences, etc., and reading in this book that in none of all these realities called spiritual, moral, or psychological has matter been overstepped. What has been used here is always matter. Shook me deeply. At first, we said, how is this possible? But later when we read the whole book, gradually it became digested and internalized. You know, the medium of the book and its guardians also mentioned us that from time to time, Mr. Ruhselman couldn't accept many points in these spiritual communiques. Then, after pondering upon these and after he digested and internalized these, he resumed the sessions. Of course, we don't know which parts of the book he reacted to like this, but I think each and every one of us experienced this reaction in his or her own way. I think these pages are one of the most important parts of this book.
Yes. And we can look at this from another angle. We talk about macrocosmos, don't we? But of course, let's not think space but think it as matter universe. We also have a microcosmos, and our bodies are a symmetry of the above. As in the ancient teachings say, as above, so below. Our body works like a symmetry of the whole system. And it is known very clearly now. All emotions have corresponding chemicals in matter. Even all variations of fears have. I will not go into technical details, but all of these emotions have their own protein chains. And these protein chains feed our cells. Starting from the first cell in the womb, even before our childhood, babyhood, birth, this one-to-one nurturing begins. And fears of the mother have more influence on these chemicals, protein chains. Towards the time of birth and during the birth, a more tremendous activity in more feeding, than the mother's first milk, colostrum. Yes, of course the colostrum is very important, but what about the other feeding? The baby receives the biological things, but what about our fears and confusion at that time? As chemicals, they constantly wash through our cells, more correctly, feed the related cells. And these chemical feeding of related cells manifest as habits. Yes, the early years are very important, but let's move to the adulthood of that baby. For which kind of fear those cells were fed most, our body builds an addiction for those kinds of chemicals. And that adult asks, why oh why those similar events happen to me? Well, actually with this embodied fear, we send out vibrations which sympathize with those kinds of events, and from the influences coming through those events, we pick up the parts suitable to our vibration, and it appears us in this way. In short, our microcosmos, that is, our body begins to grow in accordance with all those emotions of us. And that adult, without having any idea about what actually feed his or her cells or provides a fix for those cells, begins to worry about eating more organic food to be better or healthier. Yet, that person is not aware that those related cells are addicted to a certain protein chain and they reject other protein chains. I say a person, but this is valid for all of us. And those addicted cells, as they divide and multiply, increase the severity of this condition. And this is the point we must talk about: freedom of choice. Remember the question about if the system is like a video game? Let's set aside the animal stage because it is different there, but we, in the human stage, begin to become aware of the states those emotions bring about in us, and we begin spending effort to turn the tide or go against this current, by our choice, by willing it and by suffering for this choice. Because those cells say, we don't want these neuropeptides, we want the old ones, the ones we are familiar with. But we say, no, I will eat this good stuff and you will be fed with other neuropeptides. Or you choose to overcome your fear of elevators, you enter one and while it is going up you push the stop button. Well, for those cells this is a disaster and your body feels this, but you will see that doing such thing once is never enough. Why? Because, the cells that begin to be trained in this new way, need to multiply. You know, they say we need certain number of days of repeating a new habit until we can replace the old one. It is always possible to reduce the number of those days by meditating, by being mindful, by being in the moment and conscious about our acts, and we can master such situations, and we see that that fearful state is not that relevant for us anymore. Even we can laugh or feel sad about the days we spent with it. No need to feel sad about it because this is how we learn mastering that emotion and its related chemicals within our bodies. And this is how our level of comprehension ascends. Hence, the development. Hence, the evolution.
Let's stop reading at this point. Previously, such knowledge was given to humanity in small doses, drop by drop, and in order to gain such knowledge, we need to be initiated within certain teaching schools or groups by going through some tests and trials. Yet, today, if a person wants to transform something within, there are so many options. Meditations, mindfulness practices, etc., etc., if only we really want to become aware of such parts of ourselves and to be willing to work on these. And since all of us are in lockdown, stranded in our houses, what do we think the system tells us? Turn within, become aware of what is happening within you. There are so much to see and work on within us. Emotions, feelings, thoughts, beliefs, attitudes. And it is like that this message mandatory for everyone because the whole world has to turn within. So, let's not miss this opportunity. See you next week.
Yes, let's meet next week.